There are two sides to a New Orleans night. On one side are the gleaming buildings where wine glimmers in crystal glasses and power is exchanged with polite smiles. On the other are the rain-soaked streets where neon lights reflect off the water and anonymous people walk past each other without remembering their names. Between these two worlds, a woman falls, and another stops. One used to giving orders and one used to serving. But that rainy night, the line between power and dignity, between the haves and the have-nots, blurred with just one small action, a hand extended in the darkness. This story is not just about survival. It is about the true worth of a person, about courage without a name, and about the moment when an ordinary heart becomes extraordinary. And it all began with a rain. Rain fell like the sky was trying to wash the city clean. Heavy drops raced down the glass walls of the Grand Royal Hotel, slicing through reflections of gold and marble, blurring the skyline of downtown New Orleans into streaks of light. Celia Whitford stood against the window, the 40-story view stretching endlessly beneath her. Her platinum blonde hair, cut to her shoulders, shimmered under the warm light. Every strand in perfect control, just like her. The white silk dress hugged her frame, crisp and immaculate, the kind of outfit that spoke power without raising its voice. But tonight, even power felt fragile. She took a slow sip of red wine, her reflection ghosting over the storm outside. 15 years of fighting in boardrooms had taught her how to silence fear, how to turn hesitation into currency. Yet something in her chest, small, pulsing, human, whispered of fatigue. The door opened softly. "Celia," a man's voice was deep, smooth, cut through the jazz hum from the ceiling speakers. "Still awake?" She turned. Marcus Belridge, her COO, her right hand, or so she'd thought. He moved like he belonged to every room he entered. Tall, broad-shouldered, his black hair slicked back, his charcoal suit tailored to perfection. The faintest scent of whiskey followed him, mixing with expensive cologne. On his wrist, a Patek Philippe caught the light like a promise only the rich could afford. "I couldn't sleep," Celia said coolly. "Numbers don't rest, do they?" He smiled. "Neither do CEOs." He crossed the room, setting down 2 glasses. "You've been carrying too much. This," he slid a folder across the table, "might help lighten the load." Celia didn't touch it. "What is it?" "Just a temporary adjustment," he said. "Transfer your voting shares to me for a few weeks. Calm the investors after Singapore." She looked up, her eyes sharp as cut glass. "Temporary? You want me to hand you my company, Marcus?" "Only on paper," he replied easily. "You trust me." "I did," she said softly, "until you asked for that." His smile twitched. The room thickened. "You know," he murmured, stepping closer, "you wouldn't be here without me." She set her glass down. "And now you'd like to prove it." His hand shot forward, fingers closing around her wrist. "Sign it." Her breath caught. "Let go." The glass slipped from her other hand, red wine splattering across the white carpet like spilled blood. When he didn't release her, her voice dropped to a whisper. "All steel, no fear. You're crossing a line you'll regret." He leaned in close enough that she could see the storm reflected in his pupils. "Then you're not leaving this hotel walking." The next thing she knew, she was running. Down the hallway, heels striking the tile, heart pounding. The elevator was too slow. She pushed through the emergency exit and into the stairwell. Her shoes slipped on the wet concrete. A sharp twist. Pain exploded in her knee. By the time she hit the ground floor, she was crawling, gasping, the white silk dress streaked with blood and rain. She stumbled through the service door into the alley. The air was cold and sour. The sign of the Grand Royal flickered above her like a dying halo. Then, footsteps. Marcus. He stepped from the shadows, his face calm, predatory. "You made this harder than it had to be." Celia backed against the wall, voice shaking. "Don't hurt me. I can't walk." He tilted his head, almost amused. "Then stay quiet, and I'll—" "Hey!" The voice cut through the rain like a blade. Both turned. Under the dim streetlight stood a young black woman, drenched, small, but steady. Her diner uniform clung to her, the faded white shirt and red apron soaked through, sneakers heavy with mud. Her braids were tied into a tight bun, and her eyes, deep brown, lit with quiet fire, didn't waver. "Step away from her," she said, firm but calm. Marcus frowned. "This isn't your business." "It is," she said, stepping closer. "When a man corners a woman in the rain, it's everybody's business." He gave a low laugh. "You don't know who I am." "I don't need to," she said evenly. "I know what you are." Silence, the kind that tests courage. Rain dripped from the edge of the awning, pattering against the ground between them. Marcus took a step forward and stopped when she didn't flinch. Something in her eyes, not rage, not bravado, but conviction, forced him back. He hissed under his breath, muttered something that disappeared in the rain, and walked away. The woman ran to Celia's side. "You hurt?" "My leg," Celia gasped. "I can't move it." "Okay," the woman said softly, sliding an arm beneath her shoulders. "We'll get help." "I thank you," Celia murmured. "Who are you?" "Lariah Knox," she said simply. It took nearly half a mile to reach the nearest urgent care clinic. Twice Lariah tried to flag taxis. Twice they slowed, saw her, then sped off. The third driver rolled down his window long enough to say, "Try the hospital in your part of town," before leaving them in the spray. Celia froze, shocked. Lariah didn't. She just gritted her teeth and kept walking. Rain soaked through their clothes. Every step hurt, for both of them. One carried a broken leg, the other carried the weight of every closed door she'd ever faced. When they finally reached the clinic, the night had thinned into dawn. The fluorescent lights buzzed weakly. The waiting room smelled of bleach and worn-out vinyl. Hours later, Celia woke on a thin cot, her leg braced, her wrist bandaged. Beside her lay a napkin with words scribbled in blue ink, the edges damp. "You're safe now. Had to get back to work. Lariah Knox." "Don't worry, you're not alone." Celia stared at it for a long time. Her reflection stared back from the metal sink. Hair matted, mascara streaked, her face pale, stripped of power. She barely recognized herself. For the first time in 15 years, she wasn't in control. She wasn't commanding anyone. She had been helped by someone the world never looked at twice, and in that realization, something deep within her, something she didn't know had gone missing, began to stir. Outside, the rain stopped, but the echo of that night would never quite fade. Rain lashed against the taxi windows like 1,000 tiny fists. The city outside blurred. Red, violet, blue, colors smeared together by water and exhaustion. Inside, the air smelled of iron and perfume, of fear and fading wealth. Celia Whitford sat slumped in the back seat, her arms trembling as she pressed a napkin against her bleeding foot. The silk dress clung to her like regret. Her platinum hair hung limp, streaked with rain and panic. The Cartier watch on her wrist, the last trace of order, blinked faintly in the dark, ticking too loudly for her fragile silence. "Ma'am?" the driver asked, glancing through the rearview mirror. His accent was thick, his tone cautious. "You need a hospital?" Celia's throat tightened. The word hospital felt too close to exposure, to questions, to police reports, to Marcus finding her before she could even breathe. "No hospital," she whispered, her voice fraying at the edges. "Just somewhere safe." The driver hesitated. His eyes met hers through the mirror. Pale blue glass cracking under neon, and he nodded once. "There's a diner a few blocks down. 24 hours. I stop there sometimes for coffee." She nodded. She didn't care. Anywhere that wasn't him. The wipers squealed across the glass as the taxi turned onto a smaller street, the kind that slept in the shadow of the city's wealth. Neon signs hummed weakly above puddles. A red one read diner, its glow cutting through the rain like a wounded heart. The car slowed to a stop. Celia reached into her clutch, soggy, stained with wine, and pulled out a $100 bill, half torn and dripping. The driver shook his head. "Keep it. You look like you'll need more than I do." She tried to smile, but her lips trembled too much. She stepped out into the downpour, the rain instantly soaking through the silk. For a moment she stood there on the curb, one shoe gone, one heel broken, her bare foot bleeding against the cold concrete. The rain didn't cleanse, it revealed. Her reflection in the diner window was almost unrecognizable, a ghost of authority stripped down to skin and blood. And yet something in her eyes, faint but alive, refused to die. The bell above the diner door jingled again. Both women turned. Marcus Belridge stepped inside. The storm framed him like a shadow given shape. Tall, composed, but soaked through. His charcoal suit clung to his shoulders, and the rain glistened on his slicked hair. The golden face of his watch caught the diner's light, cold and perfect. Lariah froze. Celia's fingers tightened around her mug. Marcus scanned the room once. His eyes met Celia's. A smile flickered, thin as a blade. "There you are." The words slithered across the air like something rehearsed. Lariah stood instinctively between them. "Sir, we're closed." He ignored her. "You shouldn't have run, Celia. You made things messy." Celia's breath hitched. "You tried to." "Careful," he interrupted, voice smooth as oil. "You're upset." "People say foolish things when they're upset." The old man in the corner looked up, uneasy. Lariah glanced toward the phone on the wall. Marcus noticed. "I'd leave that alone," he said quietly. "Wouldn't want the police to misunderstand a business disagreement." Lariah's jaw tightened. "Looks more like you're the misunderstanding here." Something in her tone broke the polished air. Marcus turned to her, slowly, eyes narrowing. "Do you have any idea who you're speaking to?" Lariah didn't flinch. "Do you?" For a moment, the storm outside seemed to hush. Rain drummed against the glass like a heartbeat. Celia watched, frozen, watching two worlds collide, money and survival, arrogance and decency. Marcus stepped forward, the tips of his shoes leaving wet prints across the tile. Lariah didn't move. Behind her, Celia's breath came faster, panic clawing at her ribs. He reached for Lariah's arm, and that's when she pointed, not trembling, not backing down. "Touch me, and you'll find out exactly what happens when you try that again," she said, her voice low, steady, dangerous. Something in Marcus's expression cracked. Not fear, not yet, but the first glint of surprise. He wasn't used to being challenged by anyone who didn't own a boardroom. Lariah didn't move her hand. "You can walk out that door, or I can make a call that ruins you faster than she ever could." Thunder rolled outside. For a heartbeat, Marcus just stared at her, then exhaled slowly, straightening his tie. "Ladies," he murmured, voice hollow now. "Have a lovely evening." He turned and walked out, the bell jingling once more as the rain swallowed him. The silence that followed was almost holy. Celia slumped back, trembling. Lariah finally lowered her hand. "Are you okay?" she asked. Celia nodded weakly. I don't know." Lariah grabbed a towel, wiping rain and sweat from her own face. Her hands were still shaking, but she smiled faintly. "You can breathe now." Celia looked at her. Really looked. "You weren't afraid," she said softly. Lariah gave a tired laugh. "I was terrified. Just didn't let him see it." Something warm, raw, and unfamiliar rose in Celia's chest. "Why did you help me?" Lariah shrugged, pouring herself a cup of coffee. "'Cause no one helped my mama when she needed it. Figured I'd try to fix the math." The answer hit Celia harder than any insult Marcus had ever thrown. She reached for her cup again, hands still shaking, and whispered, "Thank you for seeing me, even when I didn't deserve to be seen." Lariah smiled, small and real. "Everyone deserves that, sugar, even the ones who forgot what it means." Outside, the storm began to fade. Inside, two women, one broken by power, one hardened by poverty, shared quiet in the hum of the diner's neon light. Neither knew that this night, born of fear and rain, would become the one that changed both their lives forever. The diner was half empty, wrapped in the hum of old neon and rain light. Outside, puddles caught the city's pink reflections. Inside, Celia Whitford sat in a booth, a cast still on her leg, a cracked Cartier watch glinting faintly under the amber glow. Across from her, Lariah Knox slid into the seat, still in her faded uniform and pink apron. She smelled faintly of coffee and rain. Did the leg heal? Lariah asked. Mostly, Celia said. It remembers more than I do. Pain's got a long memory. They shared a small smile. Two women from opposite worlds bound by one night that neither could forget. Celia stirred her coffee. I never thanked you properly. You don't have to, Lariah said. I do. You carried me through that storm when you didn't even know my name. I didn't do it for thanks, Lariah said simply. You look like someone who needed to be reminded the world's not all bad. Celia looked down, swallowing the lump in her throat. That's not something I was used to hearing. The neon light blinked across the table, painting them both in red and gold. Celia finally whispered, I used to think needing help was weakness. Now I think pretending I didn't need anyone was worse. Lariah leaned back, watching her. Then you've learned something most people never do. Celia's voice softened. I've had boardrooms full of people tell me I'm powerful, brilliant, but you're the first to tell me I wasn't alone. Lariah smiled faintly. You weren't. You just forgot to look around. Celia reached into her coat and unfolded a napkin, the one with Lariah's handwriting from that night. You're safe now, don't worry, you're not alone. I kept it, Celia said. It reminded me that kindness still exists. Lariah blinked, surprised. Guess I meant it. I want to do something, Celia said. A foundation, for women like you, the ones who hold others up while the world forgets them. Lariah's eyes widened. You serious? Celia nodded. And I want to name it after you. Lariah laughed softly, half in disbelief. You don't need my name. I do, Celia said. It's what got me walking again. For a moment, neither spoke. The hum of the diner filled the quiet like background music to something sacred. You know, Lariah said finally, dignity doesn't come from power. I've seen rich people act small, and waitresses stand taller than kings. Celia smiled. Then I met the right one. They laughed quietly, and for the first time the sound wasn't heavy. It was light, real, shared. When the check came, Celia reached for it, but Lariah stopped her. This one's on me, Celia frowned. Why? Because you already paid, Lariah said gently. You remembered me. Celia hesitated, then nodded. That's something I won't forget again. Outside, the rain had stopped. Celia stood at the door and looked back, at the woman who once pulled her from the storm. Lariah was already pouring coffee for another table, her face calm, her movements sure. Celia smiled, a quiet, grateful curve of the lips, and stepped out into the street. The city glimmered with puddles and light. Her limp was still there, but softer now, and for the first time in a long time, Celia didn't feel alone. Morning light bled through the glass walls of Grand Rall Tower. The city shimmered below, unaware that war was about to unfold 40 floors above. Celia Whitford walked through the marble hallway, her cane clicking softly with each step. Her reflection in the glass, poised, pale, precise, betrayed nothing of the storm still living inside her. Behind her, Lariah Knox followed in quiet strength, dressed simply but standing tall, eyes scanning the world that had never welcomed her before. Outside the boardroom doors, Celia paused. You don't have to be here, she murmured. Lariah crossed her arms. Neither do you. But here we are. Celia smiled faintly. Then she opened the door. The room was all power and pretense. A polished table, city skyline, 12 men in suits pretending not to be afraid. At the head of the table sat Marcus Belridge, the man who once held both her trust and her wrist too tightly. He rose slowly, his smile as cold as the steel cufflinks on his shirt. Celia, you look alive. Disappointed? She asked, taking her seat. He chuckled. You disappeared without signing the transfer. The investors were concerned. Celia leaned back. I imagine you were more concerned about losing control. Marcus's jaw flexed. Control is what keeps this company running. You taught me that. I also taught you loyalty, she said evenly. You failed that class. A few board members exchanged uneasy looks. Marcus gestured toward the folder in front of her, the same one he had pushed across the table that night. Sign it, Celia. The numbers don't lie. No, she said. But people do. He smirked. Still the idealist. You think integrity builds empires? Celia's tone sharpened. No, but it rebuilds them after men like you burn them down. He leaned closer, lowering his voice. Careful. I could still make this ugly. Celia didn't flinch. You already did. She slid a flash drive across the table. Security footage from the hotel suite. The conversation you thought no one recorded. Marcus froze. The boardroom fell into electric silence. Celia's voice stayed calm, deliberate. You tried to strip me of my shares. You threatened my life. That night didn't end with fear. It ended with proof. Marcus's composure cracked. You wouldn't dare. I already did, she interrupted. The files are with my lawyers. And the press in case anything happens to me again. The board members shifted in their seats. A few cleared their throats. One leaned back, muttering, Jesus. Marcus's hand twitched, a flash of fury in his eyes. You think this makes you safe? Celia's reply was soft, almost kind. No, it makes me free. For a long moment, Marcus said nothing. Then, like a cornered wolf, he laughed. You think these people care about morality? They care about profit. Then they'll like what comes next, Celia said. I'm stepping back from daily control, temporarily, to launch a new branch of Rawl Foundation, focused on social innovation, worker equity, women in business, something this company should have stood for all along. Murmurs rippled around the table. Marcus barked a laugh. You're out of your mind. You'll drain our reserves, not mine, Celia said, her gaze steady. Yours. She turned to the board. Marcus Belridge has been diverting company funds to off-book accounts for years. The audit is complete. You'll find the details in your inbox one by one. Phones buzzed. Screens lit up. And then, silence again, heavier than thunder. Marcus's face drained of color. Lariah stepped forward quietly, standing just behind Celia. Her presence was small in that vast room, but her voice wasn't. Power's not what you take, she said, meeting Marcus's eyes. It's what people let you keep. The words landed harder than any accusation. Marcus looked around the table, at the faces that had once feared him. Now none would meet his eyes. Celia rose, steadying herself on her cane. You taught me to survive, she said, but she taught me to live. And with that, she walked out, Lariah at her side, leaving Marcus alone in the empire he thought he owned. In the elevator, silence returned, but it wasn't the heavy kind anymore. Lariah looked over. You planned all that? Celia exhaled slowly. Every word, but not the courage. That part, I borrowed from you. Lariah smiled. Keep it. You wear it well. As the elevator doors closed, the reflection of both women merged on the mirrored surface. Different worlds, same fire. Below them, the city waited. And for the first time in a long time, Celia wasn't falling. She was rising. Weeks after the boardroom storm, Celia Whitford's world looked different. Gone were the glass walls and endless meetings. Now she spent her mornings in a small office above a bakery in Tremay. The sign on the door reading, the Lariah Knox Fund. It wasn't grand, just sunlight, mismatched chairs, and the hum of hope. But to Celia, it was more beautiful than any skyline she'd ever owned. Lariah stood by the window, sorting papers. You really named it after me, she teased. Celia smiled. It's not about your name. It's about what it means they spent the day welcoming women who had been forgotten. Waitresses, single moms, students who'd quit to survive. Each story felt like a piece of Celia's old armor being peeled away. That evening, under the warm flicker of old lights, Lariah led their first group meeting. This table, she said, is for anyone who's ever been told they didn't belong at one. Celia watched from the side, eyes shining. For the first time, she felt peace. Not power, not victory, just peace. Later, the two walked home through soft rain. The city glowed around them. Not hostile anymore, just alive. Celia paused. You ever think about that night? Sometimes, Lariah said, but mostly I think about what came after. Celia smiled. Me too. They crossed the street together, two silhouettes under one umbrella. Different worlds, same light. Soft rain and city ambience fade in. Gentle piano plays. Sometimes the moments that break us are the ones that make us see the truth. Celia Whitford had to lose everything to find what mattered. Not control, but connection. And Lariah Knox, she reminded the world that quiet courage can change lives. In the end, power isn't about wealth or titles. It's about kindness, the kind that doesn't need to be seen to be real. Brief pause, sound of distant thunder rolling away. Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, take a moment to share it, because maybe somewhere out there, someone needs to remember that compassion still has power.